Greetings and salutations. We are back tonight to continue our coverage. I thought eventually this could become sort of a series. Maybe we'll have a playlist of these episodes. Previously, we covered a device created by Victor Schauberger called the repulsing engine, which is very interesting in that was supposed to be both, I suppose, a free energy device and a propulsion device. And tonight we're going to be covering John Searl and the Searl effect generator, the SEG. One of the reasons that I wanted to cover John Searl next is because, like the Victor Schauberger repulsing engine, John Searl claims to have invented both a free energy device and a propulsion system that he claimed powered flying saucers that he and his team created. There are some very famous pictures in ufology of these probably 20 square, 20-foot diameter flying saucers flying right above him. You may have seen it's probably in the thumbnail for this video. These are very famous pictures I have seen in probably 10 different books about UFOs. They mention John Searl and his Searl effect generator. One of the other reasons that I thought it important to cover John Searl is because I, for a time, got to know someone local to me in Philadelphia who is quite famous in these circles of 0 point or free energy researchers. And his name was Jeffrey Miller. He has someplace that he calls Energy Bat Labs, which is just outside of Philadelphia. So, in full disclosure, I, for a time, became obsessed with these free energy devices, tinkering around in my basement, building all kinds of different things, playing with magnets, trying to see if this was possible. In most cases, you come away tantalized that it may be possible, but extremely disappointed in the actual results that you can generate. There are, just for those unaware, there are hundreds of companies out there that will sell you plans, blueprints, schematics for some sort of free energy device. Usually they want between $20 and $100 to send you the plans, and you too can build this device. But the problem is that none of them work. None that I have found sold by these let's just say, less than reputable companies, even if you build it exactly the way they describe and show you in the plans and the schematics, just don't work. Or the claims versus the reality of what it generates or creates are vastly different. And so I got to know this Jeffrey Miller a bit from Energy Bat Labs. You can look it up. He's also got a new project called Fringe Energy, which I believe is sort of like a new venture for him. But Jeffrey Miller is one of the most well-known, especially in Pennsylvania. I mean, ask anybody in Pennsylvania or the tri-state area, I suppose. If you mention 0 point energy or free energy, Energy Bat Labs and Jeffrey Miller comes up. Now, what is the tie-in here? The tie-in here is that Jeffrey Miller got to know John Searl very well. And in fact, it was Jeffrey Miller who created some of the models that are in documentaries about John Searl. In other words, Jeffrey Miller created these models of the Searl effect generator as described by John Searl. And Jeffrey Miller, being a incredibly technically proficient person who has created or recreated 100 of these kinds of devices. His lab is filled with them, and we're going to get to see some of that tonight. Jeffrey Miller said to John Searle, forget, building a model, I'll build a working model. You tell me how to do it and I'll do it. And what followed was a sort of back and forth where the thing wasn't working. And Jeffrey Miller was building it exactly the way that John Searle said it should be built, down to ridiculous machining specifications of 30 seconds of an inch. But to his credit, Jeffrey Miller has full machine shop. He can work metals, wood, whatever he wants. And tried and tried and tried and tried again to get a working version of this Searle effect generator and was unable to do so. And at the end, basically, John Searle claimed that he did not create it to the exact specifications, and that's why it didn't work. Just wanted to mention that going in. To my knowledge, no one, including John Searle, has been able to show a working model, either of this as a propulsion system or as a free energy device. But there are many people trying to replicate all over the world, believe it or not. There are many people trying to replicate this effect or build their own Searle effect generator. And some of the results that they get are very tantalizing. For example, I came across one inventor. John Searle had mentioned that at a certain point, these rotating spindles would create cold temperatures, and then through the cold temperatures, superconductivity. So some people have experimented with this and found big drops in the temperature when it was operating, but not to the point of superconductivity. Others have generated what is called over unity, which means you put in, let's say you put in 1 amp, you get out of the device 1.1 amp. So it is generating more than the input voltage. These are untested, unverified claims, but I found several people claiming a very, very slight over unity effect. In other words, they would put 1 volt in to the machine and get out 1.1 volt or 1.2 volts for a time. But again, these are unverified reports. But I'm mentioning them in trying to explain just why so many people may be completely obsessed with recreating this Searle effect generator. It's because the results, when you try to do it, although not 100% working, are tantalizing. People are getting effects that John Searle described when they try to recreate one of these Searle effect generators. So I thought the best thing to do is there's a really good video that I found on the John Searl Story. We're going to be citing fair use since this is a transformative work. We're educating the public about John Searle and his claimed invention, the Searle effect generator. We're educating the public about some of the history of the Searle effect generator and discussing it. Therefore, this is a transformative work, and fair use is allowed. So we're going to cite fair use. And this is a particularly long video, so I'm going to have to be stopping and commenting along the way. Otherwise, we may get a streaming violation or policy violation, whatever YouTube decides. Even though this video I found, I don't know for certain that it's copyrighted or it's on a non-monetized video channel. I think it is definitely for use. But we're still citing fair use in using this video, the John Searle Story. This can tell, I had initially created all of these notes to explain the John Searle Story, but the internet being what it is, people certainly prefer more multimedia presentations. So we're going to be using this video. I will be stopping along the way, commenting and critiquing. This is fair use. And again, this is called the John Searle Story. Let's see if we can't share that. And once we have gone through this, it might be a pretty long presentation. This is a 30-minute video. I'd like to get through as much of it as we can. And then just briefly, I'm going to be showing you some of Jeffrey Miller's lab, who sort of refutes the claims of John Searl. And last I spoke to Mr. Jeffrey Miller, he told me that John Searl is just a con man and constantly trying to get people to invest so that he could show them a working prototype. And yet, after 50 years of making these claims, somehow we don't have a working prototype. But again, the tantalizing effects when people study this thing, I think, is what keeps this thing going. Again, fair use, the John Searl Story. Let's get into it, friends. Oh, I did it again. 1 second. Always forget to make sure the hell is this? 1 second, friends. Okay, got it. Okay. Fair use, the John Searl Story video. Here we go. And for those unaware, the terms free energy device and 0-point energy device are sort of interchangeable. 0-point energy, again, is the belief that there is some 0 point where all atoms, molecules slow down to the point or speed up to the point that you can extract free energy sort of from the ether, right? And I believe that's where the term 0-point energy came from. And you can look up 0-point energy devices on YouTube or Google, and there is tens of thousands of videos and articles on 0-point or free energy devices. However, John Searl's is perhaps one of the most famous of these purported 0-point or free energy devices. So here we go.
In the laws of nature, there is nothing impossible except that the state of your mind makes it so.
Cleaning up this planet is going to be a big job. If we're going to get back to what we want, a lot of work got to be done. But one thing is certain, you need energy. That's important.
And it just should be mentioned that one of the selling points of all these free energy devices is that they're completely and totally environmentally friendly. They don't even take any fuel. So it sounds good. And every person that I have encountered who claims to have invented a 0-point or free energy device always mentions how good it's going to be for the environment. Always. It's sort of like a talking point.
Basically, the design is a conventional generator.
Searl tapped into 0-point energy.
The only person that I know of who has ever succeeded in making a Searl effect generator is John Searl.
That's an inaccurate statement. John Searl has never definitively shown a completely working prototype, to my knowledge. And it should be noted that the person that was just speaking there has later had some sort of financial arrangement with Mr. Searl, which may cloud his judgment about Searl being the only person to demonstrate or create a working 0-point energy generator.
The electron flow is accelerated to an extremely high rate, and it creates a vacuum around the device. And in that vacuum, you develop numbing cold. And numbing cold, as we know today, is a function of superconductivity. It also is a function of gravitational force.
For over 60 years, John Searl has tried to give to the world a new kind of energy system.
I just want to stop it right there and explain that John Searl has never tried to give this device to the world. He has tried to sell this device every chance that he has gotten. I found British TV appearances of his from, I believe, the early 1980s on a television show that seemed eerily much like the Shark Tank, where he went in and was talking with the host, the show host, and a potential investor trying to sort of sell his device to that investor. The investor declined to invest. My point being, John Searl has never tried to give it away. In fact, he's very, I would say, almost paranoidly secretive about, let's call them, methods of making some of the parts of this device. In other words, he never published, here's how you make the device, and I'm going to give this to the world because the world could benefit so much from it. No, he tried to sell it every single chance he got. He takes donations. He has been taking donations, near as I can tell, for 50 to 60 years, living off of those donations, near as I can tell. Also, he's never, for quite some time, had any form of a real job after he claims to have invented this device.
One that would free mankind from the burdens of oil and fossil fuels.
And there we go again with the environmental. Every free energy device guy has got to mention it'll free us from fossil fuels. We won't need to drill. We won't need to damage the earth. We won't need to burn and create carbon in the atmosphere. From an environmentalist standpoint, these free energy devices are incredibly appealing.
From his dreams as a child in pre-World War II England came an understanding of mathematics and magnetic forces that would change his life. From a childhood game of hopscotch came a new understanding of magic squares, a mathematical principle that is 5,000 years old. He could think laterally and not be bound by conventional rules taught through conventional methods that may have an adverse effect on the human mind.
Searl claimed that the magic squares had something to do with the way that the machine works. You can look up magic squares. It's really an old mathematical principle that's really more of a puzzle than anything, but okay.
John Searl is known all over the world as the inventor of the Searl effect generator, a magnetic device consisting of one or more rings, also called plates, and a number of cylindrical rollers that, when in motion, generate electricity.
So here we have a good view of the device. There's these rollers, and I should mention that the rollers have both a magnetic core and then a dielectric or non-magnetic coating over them. And it's the same with these rings. So some of the rings are placed, in one direction and the other rings here. And this is supposed to be the machine. And I also should mention that, yes, John Searl is famous all around the world. He has tried to get Chinese investors, Russian. There is a company in Russia trying to replicate this generator. I'm not sure what the financial arrangement for either of those two organizations is, but John Searl has been all over the world promoting his device and trying to get people to dump money in.
The generator is a magnetic device that is totally magnetic. It is its own prime mover. It will self-start and continue to run, and as far as we know, we can say never stop.
No, that's not an accurate statement, because out of the hundreds, thousands of people that have tried to replicate this, to my knowledge, no one has gotten it to run on its own. Everybody that I've seen, they have to apply some form of power to it to get the rollers to start spinning. And once that power is taken off of the machine, the rollers do not continue to spin. And this is the sort of disinformation, misinformation, propaganda that people that promote John Searl, they say things as if they're a factual statement. And then you go, okay, let's see this thing start up on its own and continue to run. Even let's see it continue to run for a week with no power applied to it. And you can't get to that proof. You will never get to that proof, which is disappointing. Yeah.
The Searl effect is an effect based on magnetic fields that generate the continual motion of magnetized rollers around magnetized rings, producing electric energy.
The generator runs in harmony with nature. The law of the squares is harmony with nature.
But the Searl effect is a great deal more than a simple generator. In our polluted and energy-starved world,
Here we go again. And again, this is more or less a propaganda film for John Searl to collect investment money. Here we go again. This is the third time they have pitched the environmental, effects that this machine could have on the world. We don't have to burn fossil fuel. It's going to be great for the environment. We'll become energy independent.
it is the hope of all mankind that we find the solutions that lead us to both prosperity and harmony with nature. Is it possible to maintain mankind's industrial output and at the same time reduce the pollutants that are slowly killing planet Earth? Is there a way to increase the productivity of the human species as we rid ourselves of the poisons and recover the waters of this world?
Yeah, so sounds great. Forget about fossil fuels. We'll just use this magic magnetic free energy device, and everybody could have one in their house, and we could get rid of all the telephone poles and the power poles and nuclear power plants, coal-fired generators, and we'll all have our own free energy device in our house.
If we're going to get the climate back to what we want, a lot of work got to be done. One thing is certain, you need energy. That's important. And it must be cheap as possible. Preferable, no pollution.
No noise, no heat, no vibration, no pollution. The Searl effect generator. The perfect machine?
As you build this, when you find out that it runs without friction, it runs without a governor, will accept any load and meet it. It will dive down in temperature at one point if you build it correctly and actually levitate and actually lift up.
If you build it correctly. Here is the out. This is the out used by John Searl and his supporters for decades now. Well, you must not have built it correctly. That's why you can't get it to float. That's why you can't get it to start on its own and run forever. That's why you can't get it to generate superconducting cold on its own. But again, there are tantalizing effects that this thing has that keep people interested in seeing if maybe, just maybe, they could get it to that point. But so far, to my knowledge, no one has been able to demonstrate this actually working, this actually floating, hovering, or generating free energy, or running on its own. But that's why it's so interesting to me, because basically this guy has been peddling this thing for 50 years, but somehow in 50 years, he hasn't been able to show us a working prototype. That is crazy to me. How does he keep this thing going? But he does.
Off the Earth, developing its own gravitational field. When you see all these things and you realize that this is a perfect machine. It is an entity. It's the closest thing to a living thing that man can make.
Does John Searl have the answer? Is John Searl's invention the point of impact between the question, what if there is a machine that could save mankind, and the answer, the Searl effect generator?
People say, well,
just to note that like Victor Schauberger and people like, I guess, Hutchinson and a few others, there's always this sort of messiah complex that they have. These people that claim to invent these free energy devices, that they're going to save our planet, right? They're going to save us from pollution. They're going to save us, and it sounds good. Like, imagine if you didn't have to pay an electric bill every month. And if electricity was free, then we could all heat our homes with electricity too. So forget about paying your gas bill. We could all have free air conditioning. We could free cars. We could have electric powered cars with a tiny version of this generator in it that you would never need to fuel or recharge. Sounds great. Sounds great. And again, I found it a common theme that all or most of these so-called free energy gurus all have a sort of messiah complex about how they're going to save us all, save our planet from pollution, save us from having to work so much because energy will be free. So everything will drop in price, from the grocery stores to, your home heating expenses.
you can't do this. You're going to upset the entire world economy. The whole economy is based on oil, and it works, they're saying. Well, it works very well for the people who are running the economy. but not necessarily for everyone else. I still
Yes, and another common theme among these free energy gurus is the sort of claim that the oil industry is trying to doesn't want people to know about this, because if people large, if people all over the world knew that you didn't need oil, uh, they would be out of business, and therefore this evil sort of dark oil company, they go around buying up inventions and shelving them or paying people to stop their research. Um, that's another common theme in the free energy sort of world, and also government cover up or government taking control of people's patents. Um, it's not that these devices don't actually work, it's that people don't want you to know that they really work. And this is a common theme.
maintain that it will not ruin the economy. It will be a very strong paradigm shift, much the same as the shift from horse and buggy to automobile.
Surely this point of impact would produce energy of its own, human energy, emotional energy, joy, relief, hope, wonder, or perhaps the darker side of human emotions, grief, hate, and jealousy.
All these years I've learnt one thing: you can't trust anyone with this technology. They want to steal it.
Yes, John Searl, like Mr. Newman, we're going to be discussing the Newman motor as well, was incredibly, as I mentioned earlier, paranoid about keeping the exact specifications on how to make each of these parts in this machine secret. And it's only when you invest with him, usually a large amount of money, that he begins becoming less tight-lipped about the specifications of the machine.
And any worker seeing this and find out how it works could sell it to another company for millions.
Because this, too, is the Searl effect. Put simply, quantum mechanics is the study of the relationship between energy and matter, in particular, the relationship between electrons and photons, the area in which the actual Searl effect takes place.
It's photons. That's the role of grounding their energy to the coil. It is simply throwing photons out. That is what you see trapped in the magnetic field around it.
Yes, and just wanted to also mention that despite my pretty vigorous study of this machine and how it works, I have no idea how this thing is supposed to work. Sounds like a lot of word salad, quantum vacuum, to me, or to a few real physicists that I've asked.
Albert Einstein's contribution, E equals mc squared, made way for huge strides in science. Very soon, abstract mathematical proofs would replace ether theory as the best explanation of all things and their relativity. Others, like Nikola Tesla, would cling to the idea that energy was all around us and that we could access this energy and transport it through the atmosphere without the need for meters or utility companies. While the greatest minds of the 20th
Here's another common theme. If you're going to be a free energy device inventor or promoter seeking investors, you always have to mention Nikola Tesla. Always. It's a common theme.
century uncovered theories about how the universe works. Far beneath this lofty exchange, John Searl was.
And I find this piece of propaganda interesting because they're going to put John Searl right next to Albert Einstein and Nikola Tesla. If you want to, you can hear John Searl sort of lecture on general physics and how his machine works. I don't think he's in anywhere near the same league as these other two men. That's just my opinion. Seems to me that he has a high school level knowledge of real physics, and then he mixes in his own version of physics that is not scientifically provable or proven.
Dreaming.
I had dreams. And those dreams are the key to all the work which I do. In fact, they're the key to all my knowledge.
The Searl effect is developed from the law of the squares, and it is from these squares that John Searl developed his generator and flying discs. But it didn't stop there. Over the course of his...
Here we see one of the large scale flying discs that, John Searl claims he put one of these engines in and it flew. In fact, there's famous pictures of it flying over his head.
Lifetime, John Searle's understanding of the squares would be used by him to explain all aspects of life in the universe, from DNA to relativity, from single-celled life to the human being, from transportation to construction of buildings. The squares could be used to understand everything.
And yeah, the squares is kind of tantalizing. It's sort of like fractals. If you look into fractals and how everything in our world could be generated by fractals and the laws concerning the mathematical principles concerning fractals, the law of the squares, or the magic number squares, are very kind of interesting. And I could see how somebody could make that leap, but I think it's a leap.
When I took up my training as an apprentice electrical engineer, about the third day, I was presented a docket to take to the stores, and I saw this tube with a small tube buff. I asked the foreman what that meant. He said, that's 2 squares. So I said, well, what is 2 squares? So he draws 2 by 2. Show me 4 squares. 4. You can take a square, if you run the numbers in normal, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that is uniform in. But when you total them up, each row, each column, each diagonal, you'll find they add up different. Putting numbers in random, we come up with a uniform output. Every line, every column, the 2 diagonals come out precisely the same.
Random numbers in squares will produce a uniform total. John Searle would soon call this the law of the squares, nature's way of achieving order from chaos. This led to Searle's revelation. From those numbers, John Searle had the exact amount of each ingredient in the rollers and rings of his generator.
Now,
And here we get back to the exacting specifications. Everything in this roller, every piece of this thing has to be built to a certain exacting, measurement. And John Searle's claim is that if you were even a tiny little bit off, the machine would not work.
every 1 square represents a quantity of a material. And that's very important. This is precisely how I developed the SEG. So I copy nature in every way. I work at trying to think how nature's doing it, and then produce this object.
World War II had ended, brought about by the most devastating weapons ever conceived. The product of those lofty minds who 20 years earlier wondered what would happen if you hit a single atom hard enough. What kind of energy was stored in this tiny place? The answer, they thought, is the source of all energy in the universe. The practical answer was bang. In fact, the biggest bang mankind could ever devise.
Einstein opened the door a bit further. Like most people, they come up with a wonderful formula. Einstein did. And then he stops at that and says, there's no way you can get this massive energy out of an atom. The cost would be too high. It's not worth it. Then you see you get another person comes along and thinks about this. Oh, no, just pump it with a proton or a neutron.
Some of the vocabulary, words like volts, ohms, amps, and watts. By 1946, John Searle had a different idea.
Yeah, so John Searle sort of piggybacks his idea onto the splitting of the atom. And his general, well, we'll get an explanation, but his general theory is instead of splitting the atom, we just pull protons off of it.
How could this energy be tapped without smashing the atom into bits? His idea was a completely new generator design.
We didn't call them Searle-effect generators then, but we were just trying to produce a generator to run the house lights on, because I felt that the big generators at the power stations were a waste of money, would present to us vast pollution problems in the future. So the whole idea was to get something to produce electricity.
Basically, the design is a conventional generator as far as how it looks. You've got a magnet passing by a coil. And all generators of electricity are based on magnetics and coils. You can pass a coil by a magnet or a magnet by a coil, but that gives you your deflection in the electron flow and the force in one direction.
I already knew most of the fundamentals. What I was doing here was trying to get rid of the petrol engine or other devices to turn the generator. That was the objective.
The two
Yeah, so his objective is a generator that requires no fuel. I'm still skeptical. I've yet to see this thing run without somebody applying some form of power to it. Even the models that people make or try to make.
two key issues are electrons and magnetic fields. John Searle understood the basic principles for generating electricity. He knew electricity was made up of electrons traveling down the wires into our homes.
To generate, you've got to have electrons for motion, great motion. That's why you go to the rare earth.
The primary component is a rare earth.
Yes, neodymium magnets. Neodymium magnets, for those that don't know, are the most powerful rare earth magnets. They're ceramic magnets and other magnets that are, they have an attractive force, but the attractive or repulsing force in a neodymium magnet is orders of magnitude more powerful than regular or cheap sort of ceramic magnets that you might have on your, refrigerator, things like that.
Although it can be any of the rare earths, the component that we use is neodymium. That's element number 60 on the periodic chart. And that unit puts out an excess of electrons for some reason, and it will also replenish them very easily.
Rare earth.
This is scientific gobbledygook. There's no scientific evidence that rare earth magnets put out an excess of electrons. That's just my take on it. I could be wrong. I'm not a physicist, but I don't believe that's an accurate statement. But this is one of the things that the people promoting John Searle have said over and over and over again. And so far, no one's been able to show me any scientific literature that proves that that's an actual, real scientific phenomenon. And just another note, this is why it's tantalizing. People feel that attractive or repulsing force of the magnet and figure there's got to be a way to get power out of the magnetic energy, right? That's the point of a lot of these magnetic generators.
It's the greatest weight of the whole materials that you're using. That has got to hold the mass of electrons.
John Searle's idea was to find a way to ease those spare electrons out of the structure and use them. Instead of smashing the atom into bits, why not tap this vast electron reservoir by using magnetic fields, same as any generator of that time?
So I say to myself, if you can release all the energy with a simple particle, surely we could ease it out gently by tunneling it in and giving it something to run up. So if we put a straight line, magnetic line, through, and the electron spins around, all this energy is spinning around and come out, we'll get a constant flow.
And again, his physics are not, let's just say his physics here that he is explaining is not conventional physics at all.
Tunneling into the atom using a specific magnetic field will cause the electrons to move in one direction, and they can be collected and used.
With production of electricity, you have two choices. You either rotate the magnetic field or you rotate the conductors. In our case, we rotate the magnetic flux. So as the roller rotates, it's also rotating around the base plate.
To make his generator work, John Searle had to overcome many problems. Most of these occurred with the shape and design of his magnets and in the behavior of their magnetic fields. How can you make a round magnet orbit another round magnet without stopping or flying off? He studied the behavior of a bar magnet and a round magnet.
There's something wrong with it. It's got a turning action on it.
It tormented me. That must be able to go straight. I placed it on and it kept straight. And not only did it keep straight, it freely moved up and down. What happens if you make a ring?
He knew magnetic fields could be impressed or printed on certain materials using a magnetizer, a device.
I just want to back that up for a second to show you
straight.
One
And not
thing.
only did it keep straight, it freely moved up and down. What happens if you make a ring?
He knew magnetic fields could be impressed or printed on certain materials.
Okay, right here. So you see how somebody's hand is moving this magnet to make it spin around? The problem with this is you need that other magnet going back and forth to keep the magnet spinning. Therefore, in the absence of somebody's hand doing it, you would need an electric device that you would have to power to move these things around the ring. So the claim of this thing running on its own is completely and totally bunk. It cannot run on its own. Somebody has to stand there and move a magnet back and forth, or a magnet has to be put on some sort of electrical device to move it back and forth. And this is a perfect, a perfect display of that right
certain
here.
materials using a magnetizer, a device common to shops and factories that use magnets.
Question that baffles scientists is why, when 3 was on, they just run round and round. The picture here was there was 2 states involved here, and of course there is.
The 2 states referred to the 2 magnetic fields printed at right angles to each other. Both the roller and the plate had independent magnetic fields, one vertical and the other radial from the center to the rim.
Clearly, the magnetic field was completely different to the magnetic fields we knew of. For some reason, why it was different at the time, I had no idea.
The intersection.
And that's worthy of noting. You can get some interesting effects by using two magnetic fields that are, let's just say, orientated differently.
Of these 2 fields produces a wave that carries the roller around the ring, although this wave was unknown at the time the phenomenon was present.
So we got fields at right angles. That's why the whole thing moves. If you haven't got 2 fields, it won't move.
Now the 2 key issues for the production of electricity were present in a totally new generator design. The electrons were available in the rare earth material. The magnetic fields induced the roller to run on the plate.
We didn't even know what the field looked like till a few years ago in Germany when we remade a segment. I said, well, let's have a look at this field. And we dusted it with very fine iron dust, shook off the surface. Do you know what that looked like? A bicycle wheel. That is the field that makes this work. Any other field won't work. That field does it. So we know that the magnetic field can be set to perform functions quite different to what we were taught in my day at school. And
this is another common theme that we see in these free energy guys. It's this belief that they understand magnetism better than a conventional physicist, or that they have some specific insight into magnetism that has been missed by general science or real physicists. Newman, several others, and John Searl all claim that they understand something about magnetism that the rest of science is missing.
I think we're only scratching the surface of magnetism.
Was this thing a generator? It created an extremely high voltage, but John Searl had no control over it whatsoever. With each experiment came a new set of questions.
My magnetism is not your magnetism.
Here we see that theme repeated again. He has some, different form of magnetism.
Could it be that general magnetism contains multiple bands, a magnetic spectrum, exactly the same as white light contains a spectrum of colors?
Magnetism is identical to light. In a way, that's how I look at it. They're identical, they're pairs.
John Searl used a combination of AC and DC current when magnetizing the components of his generator.
If we isolate the particular band we want and then print that, we have something different, we have a wave.
This is the Searl effect, the intersection of 2 magnetic fields creating a magnetic wave that can be measured and amplified. John Searl designed a generator using magnetic fields to induce a flow of electrons from a rare earth element through a system of rotating magnetized components so that those electrons would be collected, compressed, used, and recycled, magnetic forces and electrons in motion, the two key issues.
All right, we're going to stop right here. Demonstration of LED lights receiving power from electrons emitted from ring and rollers. But here's the problem. The problem is that the power that they're putting in to make this thing spin versus the power that they're getting out to light these LEDs. Yeah. How can I explain this better? So they're putting more energy into the device to make these things spin than they're getting out to light these LEDs. Therefore, it's not generating free energy. In fact, it's operating at a deficit. In other words, they're putting 1 amp in and they're getting 0.1 amp out. That won't do anything for you. If you need 1 amp to generate 0.1 amp, then you're just wasting energy watching this thing spin. Will it light some LEDs or charge a battery? Yes, but you're always going to be putting in much more energy into the device than you are harvesting out. And that's my general problem with this thing so far.
Issues necessary for the production of electricity.
Yes, a condition you can get a wave in a magnetic sense, like a wave, a sine wave, and they act as a river. Now they're stationary until reaction effects takes place, and to do that you have to set a cylinder on it, magnetized, and then that wave goes into motion.
Now the roller placed on that field, it floats. We know it cannot touch that, it's too dense with energy, so it'll float. So we got something floating there. Then if this wave is moved due to reaction between this plate, this roller and this plate, then that wave is going to carry that regardless. So the roller maintains still its constant height. Though it's now running many times faster, it does not fly off.
The magnetic field is holding the roller tightly to the plate. At the same time, the electrons moving through the layered elements are collected and compressed on the surface of the plate, lifting the roller and creating space between the roller and the plate.
So the roller flies round and doesn't roll round. As it moves, the field is being rewritten all the time. So the field never diminishes. It cannot diminish because a magnetic field is in constant running order.
The energy or electrons moving through the system recycle. The rare earth element attracts new electrons that also move through the system and recycle. Because of their negative charge, the electrons compress, causing the drop in temperature and creating the energy field that radiates from the generator.
And this is another claim that the device drops in temperature once it starts operating, therefore creating some sort of superconducting effect. And this has been, at least a drop in temperature has been demonstrated by experimenters trying to replicate this device. Not enough to create superconductive sort of temperatures, but enough that it's a measurable effect that it drops in temperature.
In 1956, I was soldering. I had to produce another unit, and this time we wasn't powering it up. I wanted to try to meter up things to see what the oscilloscope was showing me. And it was accidental that when I took the hot iron to solder the wire on, I couldn't solder it. Something from the machine was cooling things faster than you could heat them. That was accounting for some of the behavior of those early models. Counting for why, when I got a hold of it, I was stuck to it.
I just wanted to stop here and mention that he mentions building one of these devices in 1956. One of the problems I have with John Searl is if you created this device in 1956 and it worked, why can't you recreate it today in 2020 with all of the advances in machinery, in tools, 3D printing? Somehow I can't recreate the device, but he made them, the originals, in 1956. And the story goes something like the government stole them, from him. He was arrested for a short time, apparently for stealing power from the power company, but he claims no, it was his generator that was hooked up to his home powering it, when other reports from court even indicate that he basically stole wire, just hooked a wire up to the local power pole and stole his house power, which is an interesting part of his story.
John Searl created a generator design that became a superconductor, producing extreme cold and incredibly high voltage that caused it to lift off the ground. But could he control this flying disc generator?
One thing I didn't know was that gravity can be inversed. No scientists ever had come up with that idea.
Again, he's special. He has a special understanding of not only magnetism, but gravity now, and how gravity can be reversed.
Clearly, the magnetic field was completely different to the magnetic fields we knew of.
The heavy rollers spinning as they rotate around the plates acted like a flywheel and caused a gyroscopic effect. The extremely high voltage created a dense field surrounding the generator, a device built with individually magnetized components.
I think it's interesting, too, that they're using this sort of toroidal effect. The toroids,
Dense field surrounding the generator, a device built with individually magnetized components. Incorporating these principles displayed by the device, he christened it Gyro Flywheel High Energy Density Mechanical Magnetic Device, but it would soon be known as the Levity disc.
You've got to put a load, resistance load, on the generator to speed it up. And once it starts, you get to about, on average, about 1 million volts. It begins to really build up a charge. Then this superconductivity switches in and the Earth pushes it up. But it's also affecting the atmosphere above it. It is making it pull to the rim and rotate with a field. So you've got like a hurricane effort. It's sucking it up. There's a magnetic field. There's a gap, a vacuum between that.
Yeah, here we see an explanation of this effect, and it sounds great. And we're getting into the flying saucer portion of John Searl's story, which is incredibly interesting. We saw those, clips of people basically building a flying saucer, and he claimed that you could put this thing in the middle of the flying saucer and it would float.
And the rim, and it's the photons which is discharged, trapped by the magnetic field, which gives it the glow.
Basically, the Searl effect was meant to turn the ether, which is all around us, which contains energy, and tap into this energy, which has euphemistically now been known as 0-point energy. And various other people who followed Searl's footsteps have also potted around, and they've tapped into it by mistake.
I can understand why people would have difficulty in understanding it, because it does take a great deal of effort to make sense of it technically.
Fernando Morris, an electrical engineer and computer specialist, is...
Fernando Morris is now in business with Mr. John Searl. They have a company, and they're soliciting investors, trying to make these generators. And he's a very interesting character because he's a little more scientifically, let's just say classically scientifically trained as a computer scientist. But he is intensely interested in this Searl effect generator, so much so that he basically has dedicated his life to trying to make one work. And you've got to admire that kind of passion and that kind of intense interest in this subject.
Responsible for the most credible attempt to rebuild the Searl effect generator.
We have something here that needs to be investigated. And really, that's my role. I am a technical investigator of the SEG.
In his home laboratory workshop near San Diego, California, Morris is following the footsteps of John Searl. Personally guided by Searl himself, he is rebuilding the generator precisely as Searl did long ago. Morris developed the unit that reveals a magnetic sine wave in the Searl generator.
That's how it started off, is to try to build a magnetizer for it. And if I could develop this sine wave, which I'd never heard of before, I think we're onto something, and we can build upon that. Now that is proven, repeatable, and I've got the unit to do that. It's a process of magnetizing the rollers and the plate. And when you develop sine waves on it, what you in effect you're developing a motor, and that's essential if it's going to be a viable device.
Yeah, so it's interesting that some of John Searle's claims about the device, how it works, and the effects that it has turn out to be absolutely true. There is a sort of wave magnetic field generated from these spinning rollers, and this has been proven.
That's exactly what I've been saying since 1946. There is a waveform in a magnetic domain on that metal. And the scientists say impossible.
After years of studying Searle's books, trying to decipher their meaning, and endless question and answer sessions with the man himself, what does he know that assures him Searle is right?
I'm going to release a piece of information here that I've shared before, and that is the law of squares. That's one of those question marks right now, is how does that come about? It took me a while to understand it, but what it is, it represents time, space, and energy. And what it says, it's in a random state. That's not useful energy. But what John has done is he has transposed that matrix so that the output is uniform. And within nature, uniformity means resonance. So if you can resonate that random energy, you got yourself an electric current, because electrons are the only things that are free to move on metal. So what we got here is a converter of random energy into electrical current.
Yeah, a converter that apparently creates energy from nothing. And again, sounds good, but it violates every known law of physics if this thing truly works the way in which John Searle describes it working. Could every scientist or most scientists be wrong, and John Searle and a few others that support him be right? Sure, I leave open that possibility.
And that's the brilliance behind the machine here, is not only was John able to decipher his matrix, but he was able to make it into a workable device, and that's the SEG.
Morris's mock-up of the SEG needs an outside power source, just like Searle's original back in 1946.
As stated, no one so far has shown me one of these devices operating under its own power. They always have to apply power to it to get it to spin. And that, to me, is very disappointing. If this guy is a computer scientist, obviously he's very technically proficient, and he's got John Searle telling him exactly how to create the device, shouldn't he be able to show us it working without a power source? So far, no, he's not able to do that. He always has to apply power to it. But here we get into the, okay, well, if we apply power to it, we see some of the effects that John Searle talked about. And that, for some, is proof enough of the legitimacy of John Searle's research.
This unit does not contain the rare earth material and will not display the Searle effect. It was built to demonstrate Searle's contention that spinning magnets give off an electric charge as measured by the flashing LEDs. What will be the reaction if and when the Searle generator functions as the inventor assures it will?
I think the public will demand to know, why has this technology been ignored? Why have the experts failed to recognize it? John has a solution that is really the ultimate solution, because we're using energy that's already available in nature, and it's benign. I think we have a wonderful opportunity here.
I just want to stop it here for a moment just to mention that if you move magnets past a coil, no matter how you do it, the magnets moving past that coil will generate some electricity. So for them to make these claims is pretty suspect, because they're powering a device to move magnets around in a circle, and then they put a device there with a coil on it and some LEDs to prove that it's generating electricity. But again, they're putting in more energy to spin the device than they're getting out from this small coil device with the LEDs. It seems to me to be almost like a magic trick. Like, see, it's generating power. Yeah, and if you were to spin those magnets around with your hand and put that device there with the coil and the LEDs, it would light up the LEDs. It doesn't prove anything about these more fantastical claims of John Searle.
It's a shame it hasn't been taken advantage of. I mean, John has been struggling to get this technology out for years.
John A. Thomas Jr. wrote a book about Searle, then formed a corporation with him in 1996, DISC, Direct International Science Consortium, for the purpose of rebuilding the Searle generator. Thomas's study of the Searle effect has convinced him beyond any doubt that Searle is telling the truth.
And the United States has not heard of Professor Searle. They don't know who in the hell he is.
Yeah, and as I mentioned previously, this gentleman has a business relation. This gentleman that is making factual statements as if they are factual, like John Searle is the only person that's ever produced a 0-point energy device, has a business relationship with him. He's written a book on him. So he just can't be trusted to tell us factual information if he has a vested financial interest in making people believe that this is true, possible, or a reality. He's selling a book, and he's got a company where they're, trying to get people to invest so that they can create these generators, which, by the way, John Searle created all by himself in 1954, the first ones, using a machine shop at his job, which I believe he worked for an English electric company. So in 1954, by himself, just using some, common machine shop tools and components, he was able to create these devices. And yet 50 years later, after creating multiple companies, taking tons of investment capital, all the advancements in tools, 3D printing, electronics, computers, he can't recreate them with all that help. That to me is very suspect.
The people of this world have been offered this technology in a refined form that's usable since the early 50s. And it was their right to have it. And it's been taken away from them by the media and by the power companies and by the people who are running this economic society. And we have been told that we cannot have this and it can't exist. Yeah, we could be living in a new world today that we should have had 25 years ago.
John,
does this sound familiar? This is the same sort of speech given by UFO people. We have crashed recovered flying saucers, and we could have had free energy as early as 1947 or 1948, and they're holding this technology back from us. It's a big grand conspiracy, and we could be living in a whole new age right now. And this is, again, a common theme in the free energy sort of community. It's all cover up. They don't want us to have this. It's all secret technology that they want to keep secret from the masses so that they can keep robbing us every month for oil and gasoline.
John Searle has since reformed the Searle International Space Research Consortium, or SISRC, an offshoot of his earlier organization. The Searle effect generator represents a fork in the road of scientific development that was abandoned nearly a century ago when ether theory became a relic of the past.
The trouble is, we're confronted by a brick wall called the expert scientific world. If they haven't done it or cannot do it, it's impossible to do. All these years, 1964, we were at a peak, we were demonstrating, and still the scientists say it's impossible to do. Really? Well, we're going to show you. They're wrong. And they have held up this technology since 1946 to today.
Perhaps it's easier to believe that Searle's technology does not exist.
Yeah, I think it is easier to believe it. It would be easier to believe that Mr. Searle's technology does exist if you can show us a working prototype. And again, this is the problem that I've always had with John Searle. I love this story. I'm a computer and electronics nerd, right? And I spent some time myself trying to build some of these weird devices that I got plans for on eBay. And yeah, I would love it if this was real. But the problem I keep coming back to is if you say you had working models, where are they? And if you say you could build this in 1956, why can't you just build another one? The government stole the originals from him or something like that. Okay, so build it again. And he's got expert help in the form of computer scientists, physicists, electromechanical engineers. There are people all over the internet trying to make this thing work. Look it up on YouTube. There is thousands and thousands of videos of experimenters building models of it or trying to build a working version of it. Some people become obsessed with this thing and are convinced that it will work. But if he already had it working, why are all these people spending all this time and not getting a working model?
The Searle effect generator at first look seems to violate known physical laws. Energy must come from somewhere. John says he found it in the rare earth material. Could it be that simple? Searle speaks his own language, a combination of known physics and terms he created to describe his invention. Numbers in squares told Searle that nature has a way of creating order out of chaos. Does the Searle effect generator convert random energy into usable electricity? When his generator is overloaded, it affects gravity and flies.
Again, this is made as a factual statement. When his generator is overloaded, it creates an anti-gravity effect. That has never been demonstrated. We have some pictures of supposed flying saucers that were flying over his head. He claims that he created flying saucers that flew using this generator, but we don't have any proof other than some grainy photos from the late 50s.
Says he gave it a body and let it fly. What is the truth? German philosopher Arthur Schopenhauer was once quoted as saying, "All truth passes through three stages. First, it is ridiculed. Second, it is violently opposed. Third, it is accepted as being self-evident." Could it be that John Searle's technology is passing through Schopenhauer's three phases of truth? The movement toward alternative energy sources is worldwide and essential. The promise of a working Searle effect generator represents a paradigm shift and a renewed hope for all life on Earth.
So there we have it, friends, which I think this is an excellent video, but only if you have someone that's knowledgeable about this subject commenting every so often as we did tonight, because they make a lot of statements that they make these statements as if they're factual. And it's important, like I said, to have someone who I looked into this thing, never tried to build one myself because I knew somebody that did. And the guy that I knew that did try to build this actually built the models. Some of the models that we saw in this documentary were built by Jeffrey Miller. I mentioned him in the beginning of our presentation. And I have to say that for purposes of full disclosure, I reached out to Mr. Miller to try to get an interview about the Searle effect generator. However, I reached out to him 3 or 4 times, and Mr. Miller is sort of, I would describe him sort of as like the absent-minded professor, right? Or something like that. Like he is a sort of a unique character, totally focused on science and his work. And he, for a month at a time, will not check his email. Eventually, I'm hopeful that he'll get back to me and we can reconnect. I really enjoyed talking to him a few years ago about both the Searle effect generator and many of these free energy devices. Jeffrey Miller is well known in the fringe or 0-point energy community, had a big lab outside of Philadelphia, got to know him a little bit. I think he's an amazing character because he basically was obsessed with these free energy devices and built all of them. He's got this warehouse, which we're gonna take a look at, where he has tried to recreate virtually all of the major of these free energy devices to see if any of them worked. He's created his own energy devices with varying results. But the important thing to know about Jeffrey Miller is that Jeffrey Miller made some of these models that you saw in this sort of mini documentary that we just witnessed. And Jeffrey Miller came away from his personal interactions with Mr. Searle believing that he was nothing more than a con man who was always trying to solicit donations and money from people for his research. And Jeffrey Miller, having had a life of experience in electrical engineering and building many, many different things, he's an impressive person that I trust his judgment. He came away saying, it can't work, it won't work. John Searle can't explain to me how to make it work. I was going to build it exactly how Searle wanted it. Whatever he wanted, I had the tools, the machining, the materials. I could get any material that he wants. He couldn't explain to me why I followed his instructions exactly and to the letter, and it didn't work as described. So Jeffrey Miller sort of became obsessed with talking to John Searle, going, okay, like, why is this not working? And basically, Jeffrey Miller told me, and this is a secondhand account, take from it what you will, but I'm relaying my conversation with Jeffrey Miller and his personal experience with John Searle, was that John Searle simply made a great deal of excuses for why the machine wouldn't work anywhere near to the level or capability that John Searle describes. Jeffrey Miller was all hands on deck. He said, I was going to dedicate months of my life, a year of my life to make this thing work. All we got was a model that when you applied power to it, the rollers would spin. But Jeffrey Miller basically said it didn't do anything. It just spun these magnets around a thing, and it looks cool, but does it generate any useful power? No. It always takes more energy input to spin the rollers than you could get out of it. So therefore, there is no free energy out of the device. I'm going to cite fair use once again, and we're going to just quickly see some of Mr. Miller's free energy lab. I consider him a trusted source on all of these things. And I know all I can say is, having spoken to him a bunch of times, I really admired and respected him. I got to know him a little bit as I was building crystal batteries. You can look those up. And that's another form of free energy that people experiment with. Of all these things, I tried playing with magnetic sort of based devices to generate energy. And other than building like what would be a high school science project standard electrical generator, crank generator, nothing worked with these so-called magnetic generators, magnetic free energy generators. And then I got into crystal batteries, which were at least tantalizing because you could measure that it was generating a very tiny amount of power, but that it would do so for a year, 2 years at a time without any energy input. Those fascinated me. I talked a lot to Mr. Miller about the crystal batteries. We did have some plans that I was going to visit and visit his lab and shop, and it just sort of never happened. I was beginning to get ready to move at that point. So this is about 2 years ago. But I hope to reconnect with him. Fascinating guy, and he could certainly be our guide into, I want to get him on the show if possible. It would be a great interview, and he can sort of be our guide into these free energy devices, and free energy claims. But let's share this. This is a sort of a tour of Mr. Miller's, and he's from, again, Energy Bat Labs. And I just got to say, for like the geek in me, this is like geek porn. This is like electronics geek porn to the maximum. He's got this huge warehouse, and it's just filled with all kinds of science, tech toys, electrical devices, generators. It's amazing. Oh, let me do that one more time. I always do that with the audio. 1 second, friends. So this is another energy experimenter that has been invited to spend the day here and see Mr. Miller's lab and warehouse.
Excited, James?
Oh, yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, this is amazing.
So I just asked Jeff if those are speakers that you're looking at, and he said yes. You want to hear them?
What's today? Friday or Saturday?
Saturday.
I mentioned the absent-minded professor. You see here, he had to ask somebody what day it was. He doesn't even know. As I got to know Mr. Miller, he's quirky. Like, he doesn't know what day it is. He doesn't return emails for a month at a time. He's just one of those guys that's like always just laser sharp focused in on whatever he's experimenting with or working on. And imagine this, he's got an entire warehouse full of these devices. And just a moment, I want to cite fair use. We're educating the public about free energy devices and some of the unique characters involved in free energy device. And Mr. Miller from Energy Vat Labs is one of those people, and he had some firsthand knowledge and experience of John Searl, which is why we're discussing him. So this is fair use. We're going to pass forward past that because I don't want to get a copyright strike over music.
Wow. So what we have is you have a primary battery, you have a switch, you have the battery board, the rotating battery board. You've got the charging unit under there, the charging switch. You've got 6 relays. You've got 3 batteries: A battery, B battery, C battery. You've got an inverter. So all you do to run the system is you go ahead and you turn on one switch, it engages everything. And you turn on the second switch. So this light right here is activating battery number 2 right now. We turn that on, we hit a third switch, that goes ahead and turns everything, all the juice onto the actual inverter. We hit.
So here he is basically demonstrating just one of the hundreds of devices in his lab.
The inverter on, and then we hit the switch for the actual inverter, which is now powering the load. So as it sits right now, that thing is running, the whole system's running perfectly. And then what happens is, if I choose to charge the other battery, then I turn on that last switch and that does the charging effect. So then the 3 batteries start rotating once the load goes down on one of the batteries. And so on the inside charging board, you have.
We're just going to fast forward past this.
Again, we've got the relays.
Here's another energy device of his.
Power charging board in here. And we're putting together another relay board that goes in here. And then what we do is we hook all these wires up to this whole system. And then we run the whole lab off of the system here.
And this is one of the 5.
That's one of the 5 major ones that we're going to be doing. Yes.
So apparently he's running his whole lab off of that one box. And here's a quantum energy generator. You gotta put the word quantum in there.
What are you doing, Jeff?
He's making terminals.
Making terminals.
To tie all those capacitors together.
Well, I guess this is enough of this, friends. I just wanted to demonstrate that I trust this man's judgment about the Searl effect generator because he spent a lifetime experimenting with these devices. Doesn't believe that the Searl effect generator can actually work, even if you have John Searl himself advising you on how exactly to build it. So we're going to stop that. 1 second, friends. And now I will devote my full attention to the live chat. This will be, so that's basically, oh wait, I had one more thing that I wanted to share. And that was from from Wikipedia. I'm going to cite fair use. We're going to share the screen because there's some interesting little tidbit of information in this little wiki article that I think is very relevant to John Searle's claims of having built flying saucers that flew and flying saucer engines. Okay. John Roy Robert Searle is a British inventor from Wantage, England. Searle claimed that between 1946 and 1956, he designed and constructed a device known as the Searle effect generator, variously claimed to be an anti-gravity and perpetual motion device. There is no evidence that these claims are accurate, and the evidence of perpetual motion machines is, in principle, ruled out by the first law of thermodynamics. Searle was an apprentice employee of B.R. Rewinds in Gray's Inn Road, London. There he gained permission to use the company's facilities and technical resources to make the device. He claims that in December 1946, with all of the magnetic components manufactured to his specifications, he assembled the generator in his residence at 30 Cawley Road in London, UK. The initial prototypes worked to produce electricity, but it generated unexpectedly extremely high voltage along with graviomagnetism, following which the initial devices were dramatically lost during testing due to strong anti-gravity effect. Yes, just like Richard Schauberger, he claimed that the device, while in his shop, flew off the workbench and busted through the roof. This is an exact claim made by Victor Schauberger previous to him, which leads me to believe that he may have heard of that and folded that into his own story. There is no independent verification of these claims. Searle was convicted of stealing electricity by bypassing his electricity meter and damaging the property of the electricity company. And one might ask, if a guy had a free energy device, why he would be stealing electricity from the power company. He then engaged in a vendetta against the electricity company. Searle has since claimed that he and his colleagues subsequently built over 50 versions of his Levity disk of various sizes, and he learned how to control them. He claims that prosecution by the authorities resulted in wrongful imprisonment and the destruction of most of his work. Yes, I've heard him claim that he got arrested for stealing power from the power company. They put him in jail, and then the government, or sort of the men in black, came in and stole everything, his notes, his tools, his working generators. And ever since then, and that happened, I believe, in 1956. And ever since then, he's been trying to recreate working versions of his device. Okay. His claim that in the early 1970s, one of his craft flew around the world several times without being detected does nothing to enhance his credibility. In 1991, Anders Herford investigated the claims of Searle concerning devices that Searle claimed to have shown, as well as verifying claimed witness reports. None of these claims could be verified. Further, Gunnar Sandberg has never seen any of the effects described. Sandberg is reporting through Hereford. Okay, so the reporter found a son of Searle who had seen discs being suspended from wires so that they could be photographed, but who hadn't seen any demonstration of anti-gravity or free energy. So there we have a good source in the form of John Searle's son saying that they were hanging these flying saucers up with wires, but he never saw them fly. I don't know about you, but I have two sons. So if I build a flying saucer, I think one of the first things that I would do is show my sons my flying saucer flying. According to several good reports, John Searle's son said he never saw the thing fly. He only saw them suspended by wires. So since 1956, John Searle has continued to solicit investor donations, investor capital, investment capital, whatever you want to call it. He's been out there collecting money for this thing for 50 years to show us a working prototype. And so far, he has not been able to show us any working prototype. So I don't want to call bullshit on this one too soon, and we may do a part 2 because there is I'm sorry, it's a lot to unpack, but there is a whole bunch of experimenters on YouTube that are worthy of looking into, and they can show some of the effects that John Searle described, like a reduction in temperature, or you know, various strange magnetic anomalies or fields being generated by the device. However, you know, a working prototype, and I don't think that if he's collecting money to make this thing a reality again for 50 plus years, I don't think that it's too much to ask to say, okay, John Searle, sounds great. Show us it working. Show us a flying saucer flying with this thing as its engine. Show us this thing generating power. Show us even the claims of it moving on its own without any fuel source have never been proven. So while I'm hopeful and there is some tantalizing effects from this machine that keep me interested, every once in a while, I check in with some of the people on YouTube that are trying to build one of these. I even considered trying to build one myself until I talked to this Mr. Miller from Energy Bat Labs, who, you know, got to speak to John Searle many, many times and build models for him and was never able to crack the code of this thing. So I kind of went, that Mr. Miller is much smarter than me. I don't want to waste my time for a year trying to build something that is a fantasy land device that will never work. But apparently Mr. Miller put in a long time, months, trying to, you know, speak back and forth to John Searle, get one to work. And for a time, he was excited by some of the tantalizing things that he was seeing while building this device, but eventually came to the conclusion that John Searle was sort of a common con man just looking for free money from people and would never produce a working prototype. That was what he told me several years ago, and true to his prediction so far, there is still not a working prototype. There are several companies working on one. I believe there's a company in China, there's a company in Russia, and a company in the UK, and one in the United States. That's at least 4 people generating some sort of business, taking investment capital from people to try to recreate this device. If this man is a hoaxer and a con artist, then he's done an incredibly great job, because there are literally thousands of people all around the globe trying to build some of these things, trying to build one. But so far, no one can show us a working prototype. And that's both sad and disappointing to me. I'd love to live in a world where this is possible and I could just have some suitcase sized thing made out of magnets, you know, powering my entire house or powering my car or powering my cabin. I would love it if this was real. We may do a part 2 just to unpack some of the tantalizing effects and people's sort of belief that this just may work. It's tantalizing, friends. So we may do a part 2, but for now, I think we're going to call this a presentation. Sorry to go so long, lots to unpack. So any comments, questions, suggestions for me in the live chat? I'm going to turn my total attention now to the live chat. We'll give some shout outs, see who's here. We have Jonaside. Shout out to Jonaside. Mark A-Hole Tirana. Shout out to Mark. Shout out to Out of Mind. Shout out to Heavy Metal. And that's Meddle. I don't believe we've seen you here before. If you are new, welcome. You are most welcome here. Shout out to Spooky. Shout out to, oh, I gotta go further. UFO Gandalf. And let's see who else. Oh, shout out to Vanessa Thor. Shout out to Sixes Design. Shout out to Missy Calve. Good to see you back. Missy Calve. Shout out to Missy Calve. Let's see. Where's it? Calve. I'm sorry. Let's see. Did we get everybody? I think so. Rodrigo Vieira is here. Good to see you, Rodrigo. Missy Calve says suspect. Yes, and stealing electricity. Yeah. I thought it was funny and somewhat ironic that a guy who claims to have invented a free energy device in the 1940s was arrested in 1956 for stealing from the power company. It's just part of the story that I think it makes this story even more interesting. Like, really? He got caught stealing power from the electric company? Why would he do that? He had a free energy device. The only guy in the world that's ever created a 0 point free energy device. Why would he have to steal? Love your vids. Thanks. I love having you here, Missy. I'm glad to see you. Good on you for please do come back. We're going to be covering a lot more of these free energy guys, including a review of the documentary Newman, which if you haven't seen it, go watch it now. It's on Netflix and a few other sites, Hulu and I think Amazon Prime. It's just called Newman. And he is the inventor of the Newman motor. It's an incredible documentary, and you probably want to see it before you see my presentation on Newman, because I've got some information on Newman that I've not found elsewhere, that I got from a really close friend of his in the form of some drawings and things. And we're going to unpack all of that on a future episode. I'm a fan of these free energy stories and devices because I want this to be real, just like I want flying saucers and aliens to be real, right? It's like, wow, imagine a world where I wouldn't have to pay for power. We could all work half as much. Half of your money goes into energy, whether you understand that or not, probably, depending on your income, I guess. I don't know. But a good percentage of most people's income goes towards paying for energy in the form of gas to heat our homes, in the form of electricity to heat our homes, or oil, or natural gas, whatever you're going to use, you have to pay people for that energy. So if there could be a free energy device, we could save that income. We could all work less. We wouldn't have to pay for gasoline for our cars. We wouldn't have to pay to heat our home or air condition our home or the lights. And imagine the effect that a device such as this could have on the third world, where many people don't have power at all, right? It would be an incredibly different world. Incredibly different world. Sixth Design says, oh my, that's a good one. Hey, it's free. Yeah, electricity is free. He wasn't lying about that. You just might go to prison for stealing it, which is a real problem. Yeah, that's a great point. Rodrigo Vieira, Stephen, there's a recently uploaded presentation from Putoff. His company put out a call for energy devices and none submitted were effective. Yeah, and I'm no fan of Hal Putoff. I think he's a crackpot. He's another person that has been pushing, or he's been sort of, I don't want to say pushing. He's one of those people that's always in documentaries talking about 0 point energy, or, or free energy devices, and how we may be able to get energy from the vacuum, but he's never produced a working device. And he's got people investing like hundreds of thousands of dollars into some of his companies for research purposes. We need energy even to pump our water here. Yeah, Vanessa Thor, there you go. There's another thing. You wouldn't have to pay for the energy to pump the water, and neither would any municipality. So everyone's bills would have to go down. Would have to go down a great deal. Electricity comes from magic, science, facts. That's why they push for magic electric cars. Yeah. Well, one of the problems with magic electric cars, and that's a good term for them, is that, like I got a friend who bought a Tesla, and he's so proud. He's like, yeah, my carbon footprint's really small. And I'm like, yeah, but what about those slaves that are being like beaten up every day and forced to mine the lithium for the batteries in your car? And he's like, that doesn't happen. And then I showed him the basically slave labor camps in Africa that are mining lithium. It doesn't make you any better of a person. And the pollution from all that lithium mining is probably more detrimental to the environment than a coal-fired plant, or, a fracking operation that is extracting oil and generating gasoline for your car. It's I guess it's apples and oranges, and it seems like an electric car is more environmentally friendly, but really, it may not be. Oh yeah, you can watch Newman on free YouTube movies. You just got to pay. You just got to watch some ads while you watch the movie. It's free on YouTube. I highly recommend this documentary, especially if you like tonight's presentation and hearing about these strange characters making these claims. But Newman is an even better one, I think, than John Searle, because he's had measurable effects. And from the people that I know that are into energy devices, most of them say that the Newman motor works. I'm still on the fence, but the Newman motor is another interesting one. Yeah, cobalt slavery too. That's another one. There's basically slave labor camps mining cobalt in different third world countries. If you go to Joe Frimage YouTube channel, you'll see put off in the videos of the device tests. It's a small, small world. Yeah. And just like the UFO subculture, sort of, Rodrigo, these free energy guys is a small subculture. And I know a little bit about that because I got into this stuff for a while. Luckily, I got out of it because it's kind of like, it's just one of those fool's missions. Like, okay, I'm going to spend a week building something, and then it's not going to do anything that the guy who sold me the plans for it says it does. Over Unity devices, magnetic, somebody sold me plans once for how to build stators that would be sort of a monopole magnet, which is technically scientifically impossible so far. There's no such thing. Yeah, I got taken on eBay. Like, these plans look good. Let's build this thing, and that's sort of like, what if this is real? Yeah. $20 for plans? What if it works? Or I just got taken for $20 for basically electronic snake oil. That's what I call some of these free energy device plans. And you can search free energy generator plans on Google, and you'll find hundreds of sites selling plans for free energy devices. I think there is valid research in electromagnetism. We can probably do some serious magic given enough research, but free energy, not very likely. Yeah, it violates the rules of thermodynamics. Energy can neither be created nor destroyed. It can only change forms. So, for example, when you burn wood and create fire, you're not creating energy from nothing. You're turning matter into energy. But these devices all purport to have no input source or use most of them use magnets. I've seen the vast majority of them use magnets, and that's the explanation. And it is tantalizing. Like, you can push you can make magnets, push and pull and do certain things. So people think that there may be something to using a bunch of magnets to somehow create a generator that doesn't require an input source. But so far, I have not been able to replicate anything usable. Okay, and William Pixley said Newman had something. Yeah, I believe that he may. I don't fully understand it, though. That's one of my problems with Newman is it doesn't appear like why. I don't understand how it works, but I know that in some cases it has been scientifically measured to work as he said. And for those that don't know, Newman, the Newman motor is basically something called an over-continuity device, which means, yes, you do have to input power to get it started, but then it outputs more power than you input. So in other words, if you put 1 amp into it, you'll get 1.5 amps out of it, 1.5, or I might be wrong about the actual ratio, but that's just a very basic explanation of how the Newman motor, somehow he puts 1 amp into the device, gets it spinning, and then the device generates 1.5 times the energy he's putting in. So the extra would be free energy, right? And there is various people on YouTube that you can see that are building Newman motors and showing the results. And those are interesting because a lot of people have been able to show that it appears, let's be very careful, it appears to output more energy than you input to it. Yeah, and a Newman motor may be something on my list of things to do. I have a big garage here, and when I first moved in, I was very excited about having this big garage because neither my wife or I believe in keeping cars in a garage. You know, it's for junk or an extra room, right? And I was going to build this shop and get back to building strange things like, weird computer projects, maybe some of this free energy and robots and stuff. Basically, I was going to have this sort of science nerd hub, but I just never got to it. I got to build some workbenches and I got to clean stuff. We still have boxes and boxes. Do you know we've lived here over 2 years and we had all our kids' baby pictures that used to be hanging in the living room in a box. And I just now this week start pulling some of that stuff out and hanging it up, trying to get rid of some of these boxes of stuff. I still may do that though. I still may build some kind of a shop uh, in the garage. I have a workbench and a few other things, but I need more for some of the stuff that I want to do. Need more space and workspace. It's on my list of things to do. Electric cars use electricity from coal and gas power plants. Yeah, so you really aren't saving Earth. If anything, you are hurting it more than just burning gas in your car. Yeah, and that would be because of the cobalt and the lithium in the batteries. It's very detrimental to the environment to mine for either of those things. And then again, Six's design is absolutely right. When you go to a charging, even if you charge it at your house, the electricity coming into your house was generated from a coal-fired, more than likely was generated from a coal-fired power plant. So you're not really helping the environment. Also in Joe's videos, you'll find Brandon Fugal, the Skinwalker Ranch owner. Small, small world. Yeah, I guess a lot of people who are interested in sort of UFOs or fringe science or paranormal topics are also at least open-minded to these free energy devices. So there is some overlap of these people. And I've noticed that a lot of free energy guys will talk about UFOs or how they think a UFO works. And they think most of the free energy guys that I've talked to, when the subject of UFOs comes up, they believe that the aliens figured out the free energy devices, and that's what's powering the craft and propulsing the craft. So that's pretty interesting. And Six's design is showing us a Wikipedia article of the Newman energy machine, which is very, very interesting. Yes, vehicles are now pretty clean compared to in the past. Six's design. I have a Mazda 5, and it's sort of a minivan, a Mazda 5. And I didn't think I was going to like it, but it was like I was really struggling to buy a decent few-year-old used car. And we found that, and then I heard 4-cylinder, and I said no. But then I drove it, and I went, feels just as speedy and zippy as the old minivan that I had that had a 6-cylinder. But I gotta say, like, the gas in that thing is incredible. Like, I don't know what it gets, like 36 miles to the gallon or something like that. And the old car was like 18, so quite a jump. Yeah, cars are becoming much more energy efficient and more environmentally friendly. They have these governors and catalytic converters now to try to deal with the carbon emissions, so they put out less carbon. Pragmagic, shalom, just popping in to say hi. We'll check out the replay. Yeah, great, Pragmagic. Can I get you anything? Like a fucking watch, maybe? No, we're glad to have you here. Even if you're late, it's okay. I know you got your own show to do or things to do. Good to see you here. Shout out to Pragmagic. Okay, the fact that hydrogen fuel cells work is not even debatable. Yeah, William Pixley, but the problem is having a car that you just put water in that then separates the water to hydrogen and powers the car sounds good. But here's the problem, William Pixley. Generally, it will take more energy to separate water into hydrogen than the hydrogen energy will produce. Does that make sense? So there have been all kinds of claims of water-powered cars. That's another free energy kind of, whole subject where you put water into a vehicle and then it has some kind of a device that separates the water into hydrogen and it fuels the car with the hydrogen. But the problem is that it costs more in energy to separate the water into the hydrogen than the hydrogen energy will produce. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but therefore it's not really a viable option unless you figure it out. Other people have said, well, what we could do is we can separate the hydrogen with solar power. So we have a solar power or solar panel that then separates the water in that way. Sure, I guess that would work, but it's still a difficult thing to do. There is some portion generated from clean power plants. In 2019, renewable energy sources accounted for about 11% of total U.S. consumption and about 17% of electricity generation. Yeah, I'm glad to see them going in that direction. But I think Missy Calvi mentioned, and she's absolutely right, that the pollution generated to create solar panels is really, really detrimental to the environment. So there we go again with another catch-22. Yeah, not true. You could build a solar cell car, and there's plenty of energy to cause the electrolysis to occur. I think I just said that, William Pixley, and that may be a good avenue of research that somebody should be undertaking, building a car with solar panels on it that converts water into hydrogen, and then the car is powered by hydrogen. And interestingly, all current gasoline-powered cars can pretty easily be converted to run from hydrogen if someone so desired. So that may be a good avenue of research. Unless you're John Searl, just steal the energy from others. Yeah, got caught and arrested for stealing electricity. Gotta love a free energy inventor that invented a free energy generator and then got arrested for stealing power from the power company. Rodrigo Vieira is in Portugal and says most of Portugal's energy comes from solar and wind. I think electric cars may have lesser impact on the environment in some countries than others compared to fossil fuels. Yeah, if your energy grid is almost entirely solar and wind, then certainly electric cars are probably better for the environment. Definitely better for air quality, I would certainly say. Yeah, was it Stan someone? Yeah, there was a gentleman who invented a water-powered car in the 80s and got a lot of attention for it, and then he got killed, or at least that's the story. And free energy sort of conspiracy theorists said that he got poisoned at a lunch that he attended somehow, and he claimed that he'd been poisoned right before he died. We may look into that story. And sixth design, a method of extracting hydrogen from water more efficiently to capture renewable energy. Yeah, and Rodrigo correctly points out that Bob Lazar had a hydrogen-powered car, and he was one of the people. He generated his hydrogen for his car from solar panel. So in that case, his fuel cost him nothing. And despite everything else that I would say about Bob Lazar, did his hydrogen-powered car work? Yes, and interestingly, he powered the same exact Corvette that I have from hydrogen. I have a 1984 Corvette, a C4. I'm not sure if his is 1984, but it's a C4 Corvette model. Yeah. In fact, I remember when I got that car, shortly after I got that car, somebody sent me like the Bob Lazar government Bible or something. And in the beginning of the video, he gets into the Corvette. And I went, oh my God, I have the same Corvette that Bob Lazar had in the early 80s or the late 80s, right? Which is interesting. Yeah, so Bob Lazar powered his hydrogen. So he powered a system that would take water and turn it into hydrogen and store it in these hydrogen cells from solar panel. So in the case of Bob Lazar's design, I suppose you have a solar powered generator. You know, you have solar cells that generate the electricity to turn the water into hydrogen, and then the hydrogen is collected into some sort of a, hydrogen storage cell, put into the car, and the car's going from hydrogen. And in that case, the energy to power the car would be free, right? After the initial investment of building you know, a device to create the hydrogen, I suppose. Yes, out of mind. The irony. I think out of mind's talking about the irony of a free energy inventor being arrested for stealing power. Yeah, Stan Meyer, maybe. Yeah, we're probably gonna do a show on that hydrogen power car and his murder. It's a good story. Yeah, maybe it was Bob's ride. Digital Communist is here. Shout out to Digital Communist. I love this guy's YouTube comments. He's got some great theories about the con artists and grifters out there. And he mixes them all together. So one word, Cliff High. Cliff High is looking into magnetic generators and posting a lot about magnets and his experiments. And I think he's basically trying to say that he's creating a free energy device out of magnets. And maybe we'll have him on and we'll interview him and talk to him about it. But I'm not a big fan of Cliff High. You know, he makes a lot of claims like his WebBot and I'm okay. Show us it working. I'm real big on that. Show us it working. Yes, there's a cool TV piece on Bob's car. It's pretty uplifting to watch. Yes, but at the same time, Rodrigo, it's pretty sad because in that he claims that he has his own. He claimed that he had. This became a big part of some argument I had. He claimed to have his own particle accelerator in that TV piece, which is impossible. And has previously claimed to have a particle accelerator in his bedroom, which is impossible. Could you have something like a technology demonstrator, something like a particle accelerator, like a high school or a college level, technology demonstrator, science project? Sure. But could you have a real particle accelerator that could generate elements you wanted to generate? Not really. No. Very roughly, a new electrolysis plant today delivers energy efficiency of around 80%. So you're losing 20%. That is not perpetual motion, nor is it free. Yeah. And see, this is why these free energy devices are so tantalizing, because it sounds good, right? But you can't really get something from nothing, and that's the problem. I think someday somebody may come up with some clever hack or some clever way to make something like this work. In fact, there's a few people that claim to have invented perpetual motion machines. And if that's the case, then you just, harness that perpetual motion with some coils and magnets, and you too can have a free energy device. But so far, nobody, there's a few people that claim to, but generally, most scientists say that perpetual motion doesn't work. That's against the laws of thermodynamics. Yeah, it will get some mileage, but it will not go forever as they have claimed. Yeah. And William Pixley says no one said it was free, just that it can work. Digital Communist speaking, I believe, of Cliff High says, sure he is. Sure he's creating a free energy device. Yes, of course it can work, but not as the hucksters claim, or not as good as the hucksters claim would be a good way to put it, right? Six's design. And that's why I said that these devices are tantalizing, because sometimes you can get some interesting results out of them, and then that spurns you to keep working on some of this stuff, going, yeah, if I just, maybe I'll build another version, and the next version is going to work better, right? Cliff is high. His name is Cliff High. Maybe his name's Cliff High for a reason. Cliff High, are you high thinking that you're going to create a free energy device? Are you going to be the next John Searl? Is it going to also be a UFO propulsion device? I love everything, Cliff, 80% of the time, but the last 20% is rough to stomach. Still love him. I agree with you 100%. Once in a while, I tune in and see what Cliff High is talking about, and I go, yeah, this is good, and I listen to the whole thing, and it's not that, and then there's a certain percentage of the time where I tune in and I go, I got to check out. This is horseshit. Yes, good point, Stephen. Bob's obsessed with cyclotrons and stuff. Yeah, or just making claims that a real physicist would know is not possible. He makes a lot of scientific claims that a real physicist looks at and go, that's not even possible. Like, it's not even possible to have a particle accelerator in your bedroom. Bob Lazar claimed he did. George Knapp claimed he did. Jeremy Corbell claimed he did. Bullshit. Not possible. You cannot have let me be very clear. You cannot have a particle accelerator in your bedroom that can create elements for you, which is what Bob Lazar has described, that he was using the particle accelerator to create this material that he was using to create his hydrogen-powered car cells. Because somehow the government made that material illegal. And his point was, well, I have my own particle accelerator. I'll just make the atoms. Folks, to make a few ounces of an atom with a particle accelerator could take months or years, right? But somehow he's creating these 10-pound hydrogen fuel cells with his homemade particle accelerator. It doesn't pan out, friends. It doesn't pan out. V is correct again. Yeah. She usually is. Reminds me of my wife, right? Well, she's right. Just don't even argue with her. Gotta love women that are always right. I've been married for like ever. And, recently I figured out that we've been working on me this whole time. I think my wife has decided that I was a fixer-upper, Got good potential, but I need a lot of work. I'd put the percentages around 50-50 though. With Cliff High, yeah. Yeah, that's where I'm at, I think. I'm at about 50-50. I think good mileage is better than nothing. Technology seems to be perfected, and who knows? Yeah, I mean, look at the gas guzzlers of the 1970s. You had cars that got 8 miles to the gallon. 8 miles to 1 gallon of gas. And now, it's very common, 30, 40 miles to the gallon. Yeah, Missy says, I thought that about Cliff High too. I think a lot of people get the sense of that. Kelsey High, Kels is high. Okay. I think by the time we can get efficiency of making electricity as close to 100% clean as possible, there will be some new form of energy generation. Yeah, maybe. And, I have the other reason that I'm interested in this stuff is because I have a personal interest in being able to power my cabin off the grid. And if I could do away with all of the work and effort of solar panel systems and wind turbines, those work though. Those are real proven technology and they work, but they're expensive and, you need a lot of batteries and things. William Pixley, I find Cliff insufferable. Wow. That's a word. Insufferable. I love Cliff's woo stuff. Some people do, see? Yes, thorium. No, I think thorium is what somebody used to kill their wives. He wasn't making that in a particle accelerator. Not as good as they claim. They explode the results to look much better than they actually perform. Yeah. I think Cliff is smart, intelligent, but I also think he wastes a lot of effort on dead-end roads, and he is trying to prove conspiracy theorists had it right all along kind of thing. Yeah, right now he's trying to prove that the government he's trying to prove this sort of vast conspiracy that Donald Trump only lost because of massive voter fraud. To everybody that believes anything Cliff High, great name though. By the way, I hope nobody here took any financial advice from Old Goat. Yeah. Now, what was the issue with that? He was telling a lot of people to invest in Bitcoin and a lot of people lost their shirts, right? But then he has some kind of disclaimer like, I'm not giving financial advice. Well, okay. And we got that one already. I've been watching live streams of engineers working on shielding for CERN. Radiation is a party spoiler. So, yeah. Your wife lets you smoke. Yeah, no, she doesn't really. She keeps on bitching at me. I'm supposed to switch to vaping. Look, and I even have some of them here, don't I? Yeah, I'm supposed to switch to the vaping, to the vapes. And I have the vapes, and I'm probably 50-50 right now between vaping and smoking. And I really got to just stop with the tobacco and go to these. But it's not the same. I don't know. Maybe this is peppermint, but every tobacco flavor that I try is horrible. And they don't have, in my state, you can't buy any of the fruit flavors anymore. I used to vape, Vanessa Thor, for 3 years. I quit smoking and I just vaped. But I was always vaping like fruit flavors like honeydew or blueberry. They don't sell those in my state anymore. You got to order them online. Maybe I'll do that. Off the grid. Hey, Yabba Grabba Brew. Don't know that I've ever seen you here before, and if not, welcome. Off the grid is difficult. Yes, I have this cabin in the mountains, and I'm learning that myself. The power part is probably the hardest to crack. Everything else is not that difficult. Water, you can find water somewhere and just truck it in if you have to. Dealing with human waste, we have a composting toilet. That was very easy. We just bought it. It's very efficient. I empty it every, I don't know, it depends on how much we're there. Like in the summer, I have to empty it once a month or something like that when there's 4 of us there. But in the winter, I can get through 3-4 months before I have to empty it. That part's easy. Heating, that part's easy. I'm surrounded by forests, so we have plenty. I make plenty of firewood, and I have a wood burner in each room in the cabin. So the hard part of off-grid is the power. We have on-grid power there right now, but I'd like to get rid of it, but I'm hesitant to, at least until I'm finished building the entire cabin, because I need the power tools. And I don't have a gas power generator, and generating enough power to run power tools with a solar system is a big challenge. Super high-tech solar skin on a car plus new gen fuel cell equals 100% clean car and no charging stations. Yeah, I often wondered, like William Pixley, I don't know about you, but I used to wonder, why don't they make electric cars that are just covered in solar cells? Because like most people, like what do? You get up in the morning, you drive to work, and then your car sits in a hot parking lot in the sun for 8 hours, and then you go home. That could be the time your car is charging. Why don't we have that already? All the parts are there. I think Tesla is looking into something like that, William Pixley. It only made sense if you read it right after you said cliff high. Cliff is high. Yeah. Remember Cash for Clunkers, they actually wanted you to totally destroy the engine block, like totally destroying it. Yeah, and I know a lot of car guys that were buying up cars left and right when they did Cash for Clunkers because they wanted to save some of the old 70s. A lot of old 70s cars got destroyed during that, but yeah, Bitcoin is doing pretty well right now. So I hear. I had some Bitcoin, and me, like a dummy, I sold my Bitcoin when it was like, I don't know, really early on, when it was like, I don't even remember, like just under $1,000 of Bitcoin. And I had a few, sold them. Sure wish I would have held on to them now. I got into Bitcoin mining, but that turned into another thing like free energy. Like it would cost more in electricity to run all the servers to do the Bitcoin mining than the Bitcoin you would get in return. So it was like the law of diminishing returns. I gave up after a while. Yes, Yaba, I did it 5 years and had no social life because it was work, work, work 24/7. Oh, are you talking about off-grid stuff, Vanessa Thor? Yeah, that's the one downside to off-grid stuff. You're trading your time. Like I have I'm down to almost no firewood at the cabin, Vanessa Thor. And I'm pissed off at Amazon right now because I ordered a new chainsaw and I'm going to cut wood this weekend and it's not coming in time. It's not going to come till tomorrow night, and it was supposed to be here this morning. So I have to fight with the saws that I have there. The saws that I have there, I got like 3 chainsaws, and each of them has some kind of issue where they break down after you use them for a little while. So then you got to stop work, get the tools out, get the blade back, So anyway, yeah, I have to trade a lot of time. In order to heat that cabin for free, all winter. It is free, except it costs me time because I got to get out there. I got to get, first of all, usually I have to gather firewood, but I got lucky this year in that a friend of mine who works at a local campground got a job cutting trees, and he's got a dump truck and everything. So he said, hey, I got some small logs. Do you want them? Because he knows I like the smaller stuff. I don't like the huge logs because it's just too much work, and my tools are not up to 30-inch log processing or splitting. So, but I got a dump truck load of real small stuff that's going to be easy to process in the second driveway. But it's going to be time. It's going to be an entire weekend, maybe 4 or 5 days of an 8-hour day. But then I'm done, and I'll have plenty of firewood for the winter. So you're right. There's never an end to the work that you have to do when you're trying to do off-grid stuff. Yeah, mining coins is way different, Vanessa. Yeah, mining coins doesn't work anymore unless you've got lots of money. Back when Bitcoin first came out, though, I was, I'm a computer science guy, so I was like, I got all these old servers. Let's try this mining, and it worked for a while, but then the power became just too much. My electric bill would be $400, and I would get $300 in Bitcoin. So we could see how that won't work out as a long-term. I wanted to make money doing that. If there's no money in it and it's just a hobby and I'm wasting more money on electricity than I'm taking in, I checked out. And I did try some things. In fact, I tried some ways to not pay for the power or to borrow, let's just say borrow the computing resources of someone else. And I can't talk anymore about that. Yeah. Like if you knew some organization that had hundreds of computers that were doing nothing at night, you may be able to set them all up to do mining on a peer-to-peer network at night for you. But then if the organization figured out that you were pegging their CPUs at 99% CPU usage for 10 hours a night, and the power that would cause them to incur expense for, they might not be too happy. Let's leave it at that. Oh yeah, yeah. Vanessa Thor says we've had several weeks of displacement and then several more weeks, no power, no water, no internet this year, so it was slightly less comfortable, but not hell. Yeah, it's been like long-term camping for you, right, Vanessa Thor? I hope things get better for you. That sucks. You know, are you home now though? Did you get back home, but you had power issues and things like that? Six design. I couldn't tell you how many cords of wood I chopped as a kid. A lot. Yeah, my dad made me do that kind of stuff. Like when we went camping, it was my job to go get the firewood always. And yeah, I did a lot of that stuff as well. Can't wait to see your stream on Newman. I'm going to watch that now. Have a good night, y'all. Good night, Missy. Good to have you here. Nice to see you here. We found a way to mine Bitcoin and still make at least $8 a day at a minimum. Hey, $8 a day, that adds up. Email me at truthseekershow@gmail.com and let me know how you're doing that. I could use $8 a day. That's how tough the economy is. If I could figure out a way to make $8 in Bitcoin a day, I would do it. And that's above electrical costs. Good. Yeah. Email me at truthseekershow@gmail.com or just click on the About section and click the email. That's my email there. Or get with me on Twitter or Facebook. I'd like to hear how you're doing that. Yes. Power consumption making Bitcoin is the biggest negative. You have to string a ton of efficient video cards, expensive cards, in order to make it worth the effort and initial cost. Actually, when I first started at Six Design, you could use the CPU and the GPU in even, a decent system, and it would work pretty well. But it's gotten so competitive now that you really need an incredible machine to do it with. Yeah, you're right, multiple GPUs and things like that. Take care, Missy. Rodrigo is checking out too. Yeah, and on that note, oh, okay. Okay, I didn't know you were the same person. Okay, so Chicky O on Twitter. Okay, now I know who you are. Yeah, you're a sort of off-grid person interested in my cabin build. I didn't recognize you from the different avatar and different user ID, but now I do. Thank you for connecting the dots for me. So yeah, get with me and let me know about that. I'd appreciate it. Vanessa Thor says, yes, home and everything is back on, helping neighbors now, had more damage. Total loss this time. Oh, that's terrible. Lose your home is something that's like horrific to me to think about, you know? Yeah, so on that note, friend, I'm glad Vanessa Thor is doing a little better and back home. On that note, friends, we are going to, here, Sixth Design put the link back up. You want to watch this Newman documentary. First of all, you're going to enjoy it. It is a great story. And second of all, we're going to be covering Newman, and this will give you a real education into this other sort of interesting character in the free energy world. And I think you'll enjoy it. So, friends, and he says you can use CPU, GPU. GPUs are more suited for the job. Yeah. Yeah. So, friends, we're gonna check out here. If you like this sort of stuff, please do let me know, because some people, when they tune in, depending on the subject that I'm covering, go not interested, and they check out. But it seems today we had good numbers and good participation, and people seem to like this subject matter. So we're going to keep going with this sort of coverage of free energy devices, free energy characters, just for a few more episodes. So until next time, friends, my name is Stephen Cambion. Good night, and God bless all of you.